Hello Leute, welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be reading you the 4 UC essays that I wrote that got me into both UC Berkeley and UC Davis. Alright, so for my first essay, I was responding to the prompt, describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. March 5th, 2024, Phoenix, Arizona. The novice race that ended in tragedy. That race was the first major race of the spring for my novice crew, whom I had mentored initially because I was the only female senior rower at the boathouse. Like many others, I had always been seeing myself as the natural leader archetype, though my many experiences at the Las Nevadas Boathouse, a nonprofit formed around bringing kids back to the water, would greatly challenge that ideal in ways where the word leader began to take precedence over the word natural. The team had just undergone a race with an inexperienced coxswain who repeated sprint commands the whole 2K or so through, overextending her crew. My more sensitive novices, such as those with asthma, were pushed to the extent of collapsing. The situation moved incredibly fast. My coaches, and my novices alike, all spread thin, turned to me to legislate, to drop the hammer on their freshman coxswain, Brenda. I was held accountable for my responsibility as a leader to mediate the confrontation and avoid larger conflicts down the line. I gave many inspirational speeches that day, but that chat with my novice coxswain was not one of them. I didn't receive any applause for it, it didn't feel good, but I had to embrace that part of leading anyway. Brenda had been my novice since before any of the other girls even thought about coming into the picture. At that moment, I was pushed to have an intimate conversation with Brenda about how her calls affected her team, how they may have seen it as negligent from their perspectives, and how Brenda wanted to move forward with her team as a young leader. That was the moment I realized within myself that leading is not comfortable. My leadership role put me in a position where I had to correct another young leader, where getting eye level with someone I respected, who I was responsible for, was integral. I provided support, compassion, and empathy in order to avoid further risks to my team's health and bond. My second PIQ is in response to the prompt, every person has a creative side, and it can be expressed in many ways, problem solving, original and innovative thinking, and artistically, to name a few. Describe how you express your creative side. My passion for writing throughout my life has stood as the antithesis to my lack of affinity for sports. It is with this basis that my sophomore year I began to plan and write my very first webcomic, Osanonori, a horror thriller story about how one female high school rower traverses the horrors of the water and her mind. Getting into athletics as somebody with a 16-minute mile time was full of humiliation and fear. When you're overweight, exercise is never just for you. I struggled with many aspects of rowing, whether it be the result of my body image, hardship breathing, disordered eating, or even just the overstimulation of being in the boat. When I focused on the shapes of this fear, I realized that even the sonar-like patterns of the waves out of focus or the odd curves I over-examined in the mirror could bring horror to everyday teenage athleticism. I sought to highlight such fears vastly underrepresented in media and society through a comic. The idea was also very appealing to me from a creative standpoint because hardly anyone is aware of rowing or crew or what that is, as opposed to soccer or volleyball, which already have popular manga and anime on their subject. I could bring my sport and the fear I gathered from it to the psyche of the public. Osono Toshionori is not an amazing athlete. She joined her community rowing team because her best friend convinced her to do so, and has spent her high school career competing against fear more than anyone else on that water. Nori represents the true experience of the underdog athlete, and like I have, needed to face these fears in order to grow. The only difference being Osono's monsters are paranormal. My first webcomic stands as a transition to more serious publication on Webtoon and YouTube, making my hobby a practice. Though this webcomic is not online yet, my 4-year athletic journey through the Las Nevadas Boathouse and the Insert Random Writing Competition award gives me confidence to continue this pursuit. My third PIQ was in response to the prompt. Beyond what has already been shared in your application, what do you believe makes you a strong candidate for admissions to the University of California? To which I answered, what is in a cup of coffee? Instead of milk, chocolate syrup, or sugar, when I got to the bottom of the cup, I struggled to associate Java with anything else but sleep deprivation. Coffee and Java were a potent pairing for semester 1 junior year me, missing practice for 9-hour programming sessions and eventually establishing discipline despite being in the worst period of burnout in my life. The ambitious sophomore who chose my classes was sure that this challenge would better me in an area I was weak in, math and problem solving. She was more than confident that the 2 years I spent learning HTML in middle school would prepare me for AP Computer Science A, APCSA. Taking on this challenge to a younger me was taking initiative to further myself. In retrospect, I realized that this had way overshot my ambitions. I took 5 weighted classes that year and attended crew practice 4 days a week. Most of my peers had already taken computer science principles. I was consistently missing assignments at a rate like never before. Computer science, more than testing my mathematical prowess, was challenging me to get out of bed. That being said, I wasn't going to learn anything if I didn't enjoy the subject. Things took a turn when I noticed just why exactly I was failing in the class. Every project I was presented with was just as much of a creative challenge as it was a critical thinking challenge to me. Again, my stubborn ambition to create big things was a double-edged sword. I needed to rely heavily on my connections to others, my friends and lovely teacher in CSA, to achieve such grandiose goals. I attended lunch tutoring almost daily with them. Those social and creative values led me to understand Java well enough to achieve a score of 3 on my APCSA exam. Through this, I found that my ambition is like a strong cup of coffee. However, it can be utilized in personal and communal pursuits if a little sugar is added. My final PIQ is in response to the prompt. Describe the most significant challenge you have faced and the steps you have taken to overcome this challenge. How has this challenge affected your academic achievement? My response was the following. A major struggle I underwent throughout high school was rejecting and attempting to distance myself from a career path and passion I had viewed as inconsequential. I wanted to feed my pride instead of my soul, and sought out pathways like design and architecture that were just creative enough. Even then, when I turned to design and architecture, I still felt out of options. I did not expect for my other options to find me. At my very lowest, the only thing I wanted to do was write. Specifically, in order to submit to the insert random writing competition with the prompt Lost, as presented by my 11th grade honors English teacher. Before I knew it, the competition consumed my winter break, bidding farewell to my junior year burnout, and hello to poetry and short stories. I had a simmering motivation to express the lost feeling I knew too well as someone soon to be released into adulthood through narrative. Stories about a girl being eaten by a toad and one trying to connect to somebody through a space and time who can make them feel found. I had found myself engrossed in the keys of my laptop once more. Parentheses, academics often scared me away during that time. 2,210 words later, I emerged with not only a unique perspective award from this poem and short story I submitted, but my truth. I now take comfort in knowing my purpose in becoming an author, English degree or not. Due almost entirely to my self-discovery junior year, I joined Miss D's creative writing class for my final year of high school. Writing and editing for both the sake of my peers and for my own honest-to-God enjoyment. Before I finalized this writing, I had already edited my college essays for my peers, as well as short stories and poems. I am now surrounded by other passionate creatives and consistently submitting to more contests, such as the Homer Humanities Young Writers Award, the Bennington College Contest, and the New York Times 100-word memoir, in the hopes of becoming formally published. Alright, well, that was all for my written and read UC personal insight questions. throughout this, I would say if I had any tips to give you, it would be to, well, I actually do have a lot. It would be to make yourself well-rounded. And by that, I don't mean make yourself seem anything that you are not. I mean, show your entire self, or I guess what you've worked on most intensely throughout these 4 essays. My targets were my experience with sports and my creativity, as well as my major struggles in, I guess, both of those areas. When addressing your struggles, you don't want to come off as the victim. You want to make yourself the kind of subject of action. So the entire interview kind of responses need to be talking about what you did in specific. You know, what you won, how you worked, how often you worked, what steps you chose to like further yourself to fix a problem, this and that, blah blah blah. You know, what you did is important to say. And otherwise, yeah, just try to be unique and creative. Talk about things that are fun, because if it's not fun and written well, you're probably not going to get in, because that person who's grading all those essays is already pretty tired of reading the same stuff over and over again about, I don't know, this and that. I don't know how I got on it, honestly, but I hope this helped. Alright, well, thank you. Outro time.